Hey guys, welcome back to Choosing Recovery. I'm Olivia.
I'm Scotty.
And today we have an incredible story from Cameron, so let's just go ahead and jump into that.
Zoom! Alright Cameron, what was your drug or drugs of choices if you had multiple, and at what age did you start using any substance?
So my drug of choice was pain pills. I actually didn't get into pain pills till my late 20s. I was kind of a late bloomer as far as the drug scene goes. I know a lot of people tend to start in their teenage years. I didn't really drink until I was like 18 or 19 and tried it one time, didn't really think much of it. I started smoking cigarettes at 15, so if that's considered a drug, that was my first drug.
Okay.
And that pretty quickly had its hooks in me, but I tried marijuana in my early 20s. And then I was just big into the party scene, but it wasn't really an issue until I tried Oxycontin for the first time.
Yeah.
And when I tried Oxycontin, it was game over.
Yep.
It's like that sort of flipped a switch in me, and everything at that point was a problem.
You were invincible.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, it's called a painkiller, and that's exactly
Emotionally too.
Absolutely.
just the angst of being 28.
Yeah.
Just having the life that I thought I would have was enough for me to think that that was a good idea. You know?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, how long have you used for?
So I got sober at the age of 33
Oh.
for the first time. So I had steady use for about 5 years. And I'd say for probably 2 or 3 years of that, I knew that it was a problem.
Okay.
The first 2 years, I was ignorantly bliss to the idea that what I was doing was actually an issue.
Normal though. It's normal though. It took me. I don't even want to get into it. Your brain gets blocked from everything else until it's like, whoa, everything's gone. You know, every last thing.
And it's crazy that you say that too, because like I remember being an addict and knowing I was an addict. You know, and like knowing there was something wrong with me, but I was like just not ready to face it. You know, that's rough. That's a hard feeling.
It is. Now, Cam, who did your addiction affect?
So I like to think that it didn't affect anybody. And I definitely liked thinking that at the time. I was, an adult, I lived by myself. Like, it was pretty easy for me to think that I wasn't hurting anybody, but obviously that was a lie. I did have people that I lived with at the time who were affected. They had to put up with me drunk, belligerent, everything in the book. And then the people that I distanced myself from were also, vastly affected. I had no relationship with my family. It was, I was the one who was late for all the family get-togethers if I came at all. I was the one who was always, in need of support for depression, quote unquote. It was easy for me to sort of mask what was really happening with, mental illness and just sort of milk that cow in order to get what I needed from it. And I was borrowing money, but I didn't want to see all this. Like I would take my money and spend it on. I would take my money and spend it on bills, and then borrow their money in order to buy the drugs that I needed, thinking that that was somehow better as long as I was still being responsible. But yeah, it was clearly affecting everybody around.
Absolutely.
As it does.
It's a good way to explain it. Now, what led you to get clean?
So, it was actually a number of different things. I think that it was actually like a perfect storm of events that really occurred in order for me to finally get to a place where I was willing to accept help. I moved out of my place. I was living with a friend who was living in dire circumstances, and I was on thin ice at a job that I thought I would never be able to get fired from. And I basically had a weekend where I knew that I had to stay sober for Monday work, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it, and not only that, but I didn't want to do it, and I just didn't want to live. so I lived with this guy, and he had a gun, and I knew where he kept his gun. I went in and I grabbed his loaded gun, and I basically put it against my head because I wanted to see if that was gonna feel like the right thing to do. I wanted to see if that brought the relief that I thought it was going to bring. And lucky for me, it didn't. You know, I obviously I didn't go through with it, but the other miracle that happened is that I actually shared that story with somebody. You know, I shared it with my brother, who cared enough about me to say, dude, what is going on? You've got to get the help. And I think listening to him when I was in that place where I knew that I couldn't not drink was enough for me to go, you're right, and surrender to the help that the people around me were offering. So that began the recovery of a very long process that was not overnight. You know, I like to say that I've been clean since then, but that's not the case.
That's a very strong message. That's really where it brings you down to your hands and knees. It takes full control over you to where, again, you've lost everything, but that doesn't mean materialistically, but that means everything inside of you, you know, to the point where you want to, you know, take your own life. And it's such an inspiration to see where you're at now. It means you can get out of that.
Yeah.
You have hope. It doesn't matter where you're at. You can dig yourself out of there. It's a very inspiring message. So, now how are you staying clean today?
So to stay clean today, I work a program. You know, I am a member of the 12-step program, and it's important for me to be of service, to carry the message to others. I have a sponsee that I work with. I have a sponsor that I work with. I have a sponsor who I talk to. You know, I have all these people around me that are in the program, that are also in a program of recovery, and that know what I'm saying when I tell them my crazy thinking. They can identify with it, and they can tell me that my crazy thinking is normal for an alcoholic, and I need that. I need that around me. And I think for me, what's been really, really important is that I continue to do new things, right? That I not only just rest on what I do every morning. Like, I have a morning routine, and like, yeah, that's great and that's good and that helps me from day to day, but I've got to keep sort of investigating and trying out new things in order to continue to grow, because I've found that if I'm not continuing to grow, I'm going backwards. Like, if I stay stagnant, there's no such thing as stagnant. It's all backwards. And so the important thing for me has been to continue to sort of do the hard shit. And, you know, it's not always easy, but that intentional diversity at least gets me to a place where I can push myself past the I don't want to do it. And as long as I can keep doing that each day, then I found that I continue to renew my faith in myself.
Absolutely.
And that's important for me.
All right. What's your biggest accomplishment in your recovery?
So I always want to say that my biggest accomplishment in my recovery, aside from the fact that I'm still sober, has been going back to school and getting a degree. Like, I sort of dismissed that as an idea. You know, like I said, I got sober at the age of 33, and so for me to go back to school was not an easy choice. But I've done some amazing things. You know, like, I think my biggest accomplishment has changed over the years. Like, at first it was I lost 20 pounds, and it was I lost 50 pounds, and then it was, you know, 60, 70, and since then I've gained it back and lost a whole bunch more, you know. But I've also gotten married to a woman who's absolutely amazing, who has no idea what it's like to see me drunk and stoned or high, and I'm so grateful for that. And I never ever would have thought that I would find myself grateful for that, or grateful to be an alcoholic, but I wouldn't have any of those things if I didn't have my sobriety. So it always sort of comes back to that very first thing, you know, like, I had to go through that to get here. And so it was not for naught, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess that goes into our next question. Would you change anything knowing what you know now?
Maybe I would have done it sooner, you know. I'm pretty lucky in that I didn't have to go to jail. I didn't, you know, get a DUI. I didn't lose a job. And I know, you know, we talked to a number of people as well, and it's rare. It's so rare for that to be the case.
Yep.
I think, you know, luckily we all get to decide where our rock bottom is, but I could have decided much sooner to do that and just been where I'm at an earlier age, and maybe physically I'd be a little bit healthier. But I mean, beyond that, absolutely not. I mean, there's nothing about my recovery or the way that I choose to do it, you know, that I would change, because it's all led me to this moment. And believe it or not, like, I actually like myself today, which is not something I could say before. For the most part, I'd say 90% of the time, maybe 75-25 on a bad day, but I'm actually comfortable in my own skin. You know, and before that was not the case. That's why I was consuming everything just to make me okay with being me.
Wow.
And you know, that's why it's so important, because you know, sometimes it is a blessing when you do go to jail or you get in trouble, because that might be the turning point in your life that actually saves your life. But when you're dead, you don't have that option anymore. And it's so unfortunate that people don't get to see that side of where they can actually be, especially in their recovery, because that's how hopeless some people get. And that's why we do what we're doing. That's why I believe you're doing what you're doing, because we feel that. You know, and it doesn't mean every day's good or every day's gonna be good, but it's so much more worth it living this way than it was before.
Like when I walked into the rooms of AA, I was 22 years old, and I felt like my world, like I was so confused with sobriety. I was like, so you mean to tell me at 22 I can never drink for the rest of my life? Like it just became legal, you know, but I drank since, you know, I was young. But it was just like that stunning fact of like, wow. And you would be surprised. I mean, we have a lot of old timers that are like that generation, and they pretty much would be like, you know, you're almost too young. You know, you can never be too young. But I was like, whoa, and that scared me, you know, that kept me coming, you know, and I listened to them more to like start young, because a lot of people are like, you don't even, like, I didn't even know, you know, like I didn't know, you know, it's a big decision, it's a big thing to follow through in your life to actually do.
Yeah, it's a commitment. It's hard, but it gets easier.
That was a huge pill to swallow at first, right? It was the idea to think that I could never drink again, right? Because I didn't know how to be without it. And I would hear people talk about, you know, I remember one of my first AA meetings that I went to in treatment, somebody had got a 20-year chip, and I thought for sure that dude was full of shit.
I love it. I love it.
How could you go 20 years? And that's just where my mindset was, that it wasn't beyond me to think that somebody was capable of lying about that for 20 years.
Right.
Absolutely. I love when people say that, because it's so true. But then once you start accumulating some time, and you see yourself, like, as long as I don't wake up today and say, I got it, you know, like I got on my own, that's when I know I can stay clean and sober. You know, when I know I have the ability to reach out to others and ask for help when I know I need help, to be humble and to give back, you know.
Like, what was the hardest thing that you faced in your active addiction?
I think that I could tell that my family, who was completely supportive of me, who loved me unconditionally, even though we had, you know, different beliefs, I could tell that they were starting to get to a point where they were going to wash their hands of me. They didn't know what to do anymore. And so I could sense that they were beginning to, as we say, love me from a distance, right? And it crushed me. Like I couldn't believe that my mother especially, right? Because I was sort of a mama's boy growing up. And I couldn't believe that she was not going to allow me to continue to manipulate her and take advantage of her and hurt her the way that I was. And so to see my family cautiously taking a step backwards was enough for me to go, okay, wait a minute, what's going on? And I think that was the hardest thing that I had to sort of deal with while actively using.
Absolutely.
As a fellow mama's boy, I understand.
Right?
I understand.
Well,
She knows that.
I know.
Yeah, like the hope is that somebody will hear that, like a mother of an addict will hear that and say, okay, then I'm thinking I should do that, maybe I should do that.
Yes.
Because you know that they're thinking it, right?
Yep.
You know that that's a thought. And so that was a huge turning point for me.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's why, again, like we do the family series, because like you said, if they hear something and it clicks through their head, like my mom stopped enabling me. Once you lose all connections to everyone around you and that loneliness kicks in, it's got to be bad enough. It does. It's got to be bad enough to where, again, the turning point. Now, if you could say something to someone still actively using, what would you say? What would you say to them?
I would just remind them that there's hope. Like I think that for me, it began to feel like I just didn't know how I was ever gonna not do this, because I tried so many times to not do it, and I kept failing over and over and over, and I didn't know that there was this community of people out there that understood how that feels and that were able to move past it. And I think for me, for anybody actively using, it's like, I would say that you're done when you're done, first of all. Like, and when you're done, just know that there is hope, there is support, and that you don't have to live your life that way. I'm so grateful for this design of living that I found myself with. And I don't know what I would do without it at this point. Because when I didn't have it, I was fucking everything up royally.
Yep.
So, I mean, I'm just, if I can do it, if lazy Cameron can do it, then anybody can do it, honestly.
100%. Now, if you could say something to a family member of someone that struggles with addiction, what would you say to that family member?
The family member, it's a little bit tougher of a question, but I feel like what I would say is you do you. You can only worry about somebody so much before you realize that that person is affecting you in a negative way and that you need to get your own help. I've seen it from all angles, and I recognize when somebody is being affected enough that they are now in need of their own program.
Yeah.
There is Al-Anon, there is, support out there for people. You guys say it a lot, like get educated, and that's exactly what you need to do, because if you don't understand it, then you're never gonna allow it to be what it needs to be in your own mind, which is, kept at a very, very, very safe distance.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
I don't know. I really feel for those that have it around, the people that we impact and that we touch and that we hurt over and over again. My only hope is that, they can get a program just like we can get a program. Whether it's AA, Al-Anon, or whatever, like, they are just as much, in need of trauma counseling as we are.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We are going to open the floor to you and let you share some experience, strength, and hope, or whatever.
I think that, one thing that I realized, because I hear, and we talked about it, before, is you guys I hear you guys talk a lot about how a lot of this stuff happens to us when we're 13 or 12, or that's what the research indicates. And it's funny because I don't identify with that as far as substances go. But I was definitely doing the same thing that I did eventually with drugs and alcohol with food, which I was isolating. I was keeping to myself. I would treat myself with whatever food I wanted that day. I would spend all my money on it. I would plot, I would scheme, I would lie. I would do all that same stuff with food. And the reason that I share that is because it today can make me feel exactly like drugs did. Like, it comes with the same amount of shame, the same amount of, guilt. And it's funny because I almost feel like it's worse in a way because it's food. Yeah. And it's not as easy to talk about. It's not as easy to say, well, yeah, last night I had a whole box of cookies and I fucking hate myself for it. Like, people don't really understand the way that they would if you were to say, yeah, I drank a case of beer last night and I hate myself for it, right? So that behavior will still manifest itself in me if I allow it. Like, I've had to sort of redirect my program and my thinking, around food, because that's the problem now. Like, that's my work now. My work now is to sort of figure out why it is I have this tendency to want to isolate, and why that behavior will still persist despite what the substance is. And so I don't know if anybody can relate with that that's listening, but if you can, just know that, again, there's hope out there, and that we can continue to change and work on ourselves, or else because I feel like it's only so long of me doing that same behavior before a drink starts sounding really, really good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so for me, like, even though it might seem innocent, it is life-threatening. It is, a possibility of me going back to that really, really negative space where I was when I was drinking and chewing pills every day.
Yeah, so I always say the disease of wanting more, because it doesn't matter what we're consuming or using, that it's always the more factor, and my sponsor, she is huge part of the Overeaters Anonymous, and she ended up falling. She's like generations older than me, right? And she ended up falling, and I was over there trying to take care of her and help her and stuff, and she was so used to living, like, she knows what she can eat and she knows what she can't eat, and people were bringing her over things, and she's like, listen, she's like, get it out. And I'm like, but Mary, and she goes, nope, I will just have my toast and an egg, and I'm like, okay, you're right, so let's get this out, and she's, like, she sticks to it, and I love that she's so driven in all of her programs, and I think that's incredible. That's a great story to have and to share. So,
and let me tell you, one of my biggest insecurities in life has always been my weight. So before I learned to love myself as a human being, and because that's an addiction for me, and it always has been, and it's not healthy for me, because I would be fat, I would get skinny, I would go back to the weight, get skinny again, over and over and over again, and I wouldn't even notice that I was doing it until the insecurity kicked back in, So it was just another way for me to fill a void that I didn't even know I had yet. So when I learned how to be capable to look inside myself and know that there's something wrong with me, then I'm able to start putting into the work with it. And now that I've actually had some time clean and sober, I see those things a little bit quicker now than I used to before, and it's saved me in so many different situations. And I totally relate with that message you shared, so it helped me. So it helped me. I needed to hear that today.
That I think I get lost on sometimes is I always assumed that the worst thing that could have happened when I was out there running and gunning was that I would die. And I think the worst thing that could have happened is I could have continued to live that way. Like, if I would have continued to live that way for the rest 40 years or however long I have ahead of me, like, I can only imagine like what that life would have been. So I always tell people, I'm like, I know that you feel like you don't care about life right now, and you're you're out there being reckless because who cares if you live or die? Well, let me just tell you, like, you might not die. Like, you might continue to live this way for the next 40 years, and that to me sounds worse.
Yes.
So it's like, let's just do the hard thing today, because today, like, the fear of changing is not as dramatic as the pain of staying the same. So it's like, I've got to just jump. I've got to take the leap and just do the work. Yeah. You know, I would encourage everybody. I love the recovery community that we have here, like via online or you know, Instagram or Zoom meetings or TikTok. Like, I would encourage everybody to become a part of that. Like, I'm involved with the podcast as well. It's called The Other Side of Hell, and you can get it wherever you listen to your podcast. We're on YouTube also, and we have a big presence on Instagram, and we'd love for you to check that out. But you know, like, I'm inspired by what you guys are doing, and I really appreciate you asking me to do this.
Absolutely.
And love for you guys to share your stories. So
grateful to have you on here.
I'm Cameron Jackson. My sobriety date is August 28th of 2015.
Woo-hoo.
And today I am grateful for life.